I'm Marion and Darneille, and this is my wife, Kimberly. We've been coming here since, September of 2012?
Yes.
We felt like we instantly belonged, and we felt like we instantly felt like this was a good place for us. I think it wasn't but a couple of months later that we actually joined the church. Basically, 3 years on Tuesday, I had a heart attack, which was actually sudden cardiac death. I died. My heart stopped at home, and then my wife, thank God, was there to perform CPR on me and keep me alive. I'm gonna kind of let her take it from there a little bit, since she experienced that since I was sort of out of it for that next couple of weeks.
Paramedics arrived, they defibrillated him, and they transported him to our local hospital. And as it just turned out, I ended up at the hospital before he did. And I began to pray, just said, Lord, let him live so this can be our testimony, show that God does exist, miracles can happen. And so he arrived, and they realized really quickly he was too sick to be fixed at our local hospital. So he got life flighted downtown. And when I arrived, they let me know that he had coded again, and they didn't expect him to live. He was not responding to any stimuli. They expected him to die, but if he did survive, he was going to be very brain damaged. And they sent a chaplain in, which you kind of know when that happens, it's pretty much game over. And I asked the chaplain to pray with us. My family was with me, his mother was with me, and we prayed over him. And shortly after we prayed over him, I noticed his eyes had popped open, and I called his name, and he rolled his head towards the sound of my voice, which was exactly the opposite of what they told me was happening. And so that was great. They started to work on him again, and shortly after that, Aaron and Kevin McAllen showed up at the hospital, and we began to pray over him again. And over the next couple of weeks, I had multiple visitors come from the church. We had Stephen Storm came, Eric Larson came, several church members from our Sunday school class came to visit us. I was getting constant messages, so I was feeling the support. Even though they weren't there, I was getting lots and lots of comfort, and I knew they were praying for him. And 2 weeks later, he got a mechanical heart pump called an LVAD. It basically works as a bypass while we wait for him to get a heart transplant. It took 2 surgeries to put the LVAD in. And the second surgery happened on a Sunday morning. It was Sunday, February the 26th. And it was a pretty short surgery, but when they came out to tell me everything was good, it was, roughly noon-ish, and the church bells across the street were ringing. And they came out to tell me he'd survived, and I actually began to jump around and sing and praise God and cry. It was beautiful. It was just a beautiful moment in my life, knowing that we'd come through the worst part. He'd survived this really terrible thing that nobody thought he would survive. And I later found out that Kevin had used Marion's story as an illustration that very morning at about that same time while he was being worked on. So his story was already being used for God's glory, and that made it even more special to me. Over the next couple of weeks, next couple of days, he began to walk, and 29 days after he technically died, he came home. And just 3 days after that, we had him back here in the church so everybody could see that he had survived. I wouldn't wish this experience on anybody, but, so much good has come from something so terrible, something awful. Another church member gave me a card, and I didn't even open it, until a couple of days later. It was just sitting in my bag, and I popped it open, and I was particularly upset that day. It was a very upsetting day, whatever it was going on. And I was worried about money. I was not eating enough meals of the day in the hospital because it was so expensive. And so I popped open that card after being particularly upset, and it was enough money to provide me with meals down at the hospital for several days, which was such a blessing.
People helped and provided for us every step of the way. When I didn't know how I was going to work, and as a husband, you always want to be that provider for your family. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to provide for her at all. I didn't know how we were going to pay our bills or how the medical bills were going to look. But we had our personal family. We had our church family. We had so much support that I don't think people realize that that's the support that you need when you're at your lowest.